Whose cult is it anyway? Act 1. Setting the stage. A joyful discordance. Oh my goodness. You all, welcome! Grab a seat, take a breath. Did you bring popcorn? I hope so, because tonight we're not just watching a movie. We're diving headfirst into the cinematic universe that is the comment section of the internet. I know, some say never read the comments. They whisper it like an old sailor's warning. Beware the siren call of anonymous opinions. But me? I say, if you truly want to understand the human condition, stand in the middle of the comment section during a philosophical debate and watch everyone fling tomatoes at each other. It's like a food fight you can't wash off. So there I am, lounging on a Sunday, doing what all reasonable people do on the weekend, reading about 17th century moral philosophy and sipping too much coffee. My friend Joey, yes, our Joey, posts a thought. Joey's curious, like Socrates, or maybe just like that cat that knocked over your plant. He asks, what's the epistemological argument that strict atheists can't impose universal morality? In other words, he's asking, if there's no divine authority, can you justify forcing everyone to follow the same moral rules? Nice. Deep. He expects maybe 5 replies, 3 from his philosophy club and 2 from his aunt. But oh no, the internet smelled nuance and said, stop everything. Someone is trying to talk about philosophy without a fight. Get him. Suddenly, a tidal wave of comments hits. People misread, misquote, and in some cases, I swear, misspell epistemology. It's chaos. And amidst this chaos, your dear Isabella hopped in, popcorn in hand, to watch. And then I thought, why let this go to waste? Why not turn this into a one-woman roast? So here we are. I'm going to defend Joey. I'm going to take apart every misunderstanding, and I'm going to point out the logical fallacies with a smile on my face and maybe a glitter cannon. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone with access to a microphone and too much time. But before we dive into our lineup of colorful characters, let's recap the plot of our saga. The original thought, or what Joey actually said. Joey writes, there is no such thing as a moral wrong without religious backing of some kind. Let's freeze that. He's not saying, without God you'll all be heathen murderers. He's positing a meta-ethical argument. If you assume strict atheism, meaning no gods, no divine moral law, no cosmic karma, then what is your basis for saying something is universally wrong? Not just, I personally dislike murder, but wrong for everyone, everywhere, always. This question isn't new. It's as old as Hume and as complicated as 7 a.m. math. It's about the is-ought distinction. We can know what is, but how do we derive what ought to be without smuggling in assumptions? Joey's question invites discussion. It doesn't declare, all atheists are immoral. It says, let's talk about how we justify universal moral claims in a purely naturalistic universe. It could have been a thoughtful conversation. Instead, the comment section exploded like a fireworks display in a library. People condescended, misinterpreted, strawmanned, and, oh yes, one even diagnosed Joey with psychopathy. Because nothing says, I love logic, like slapping on a psychiatric label after misreading someone. Honestly, if Socrates had Twitter, he'd have been executed way earlier. You ready? Good. Let's dive into the cast. Keep your arms and legs inside the vehicle at all times. Act 2. Enter random username 2961. Strawman are us. Our first contestant, random username 2961, enters with confidence. Picture them swaggering in with a toga and a dictionary. They proclaim, morals do not equal religion. Socrates already said so. Beautiful. That's like someone hearing you wonder about climate change and replying, weather does not equal my grandma. Newton already said so. You wonder if they read your words or took a screenshot and asked a cat for translation. Joey's claim was about epistemology, the study of how we know things. He didn't say morality equals religion. He said, without some backing beyond human opinion, we can't claim universal moral wrongs. But random username declares victory because Socrates once asked if something is good because the gods love it, or gods love it because it's good. That's the Euthyphro dilemma. Great. You know what Socrates also said? That he knows nothing. Doesn't stop the internet from claiming they know everything because of one quote. Let's unpack random usernames logic. Premise. Socrates says morality is not founded on gods alone. Conclusion. Therefore, Joey is wrong. It's like saying, the sun is hot, therefore I am pizza. They present a red herring, a separate discussion about whether moral truths are independent of the divine, as though it answers Joey's question about justification. Instead of addressing the is-ought problem, they shout, Socrates, and run away. That's appeal to authority and straw man rolled into one. I'd love to invite them on stage, but I fear they'd answer, turtles do not equal turtles. Aristotle already said so. Act 3. Stephen Ogden 58 and the chicken or egg conundrum. Next, Stephen Ogden 58 pops in with a question. But which came first, the wrong or the religious sanction? Ooh, I like this one. They're asking whether something is wrong because religion says so, or religion says so because it's wrong. That is the heart of the Euthyphro problem. For a second I thought, yes, we've got a philosopher in the building. Then Joey responded, sounds like a question for a philosophy professor. Cue the audience, oh, burn! But hold your applause. This isn't a dismissal. It's an invitation to deeper conversation. It's saying, hey, we can go down that rabbit hole, but it won't be resolved in a comment thread. Let's bring Socrates, Kant, Nietzsche, maybe an entire library. But the internet doesn't like nuance. It likes immediate gratification. Someone says, sounds like a question for a philosophy professor, and another voice pops up, snuggled rug. But you seemed so certain you had the answers just moments ago. Ah, snuggled rug, we're going to revisit you. But first, let's salute Stephen's curiosity. He asked a good question. Where he slipped was assuming Joey's statement was claiming the chicken came first, that religion created morality. Joey wasn't asserting that. He was challenging the assumption that you can derive moral universality from facts alone. It's like I say, without a recipe, you can't assert your cake is authentic French. And someone replies, but eggs existed before recipes. Maybe, but my point about recipes remains. Act 4. Old Chalice 8, the empathy confusion. Enter Old Chalice 8. They say, I don't know, man. I would say murder, rape, and pedophilia are all morally wrong, and I'm not religious. You can almost hear the exasperated sigh. This comment is the internet equivalent of throwing down your bowl of cereal and saying, well, I like pancakes. Let's be clear. Joey never said atheists can't have moral opinions. He never claimed you need to be religious to find murder abhorrent. The argument is about justification. It's like this. I, Isabella, believe pineapple on pizza is an abomination. Yes, fight me. Do I personally feel it is universally wrong? Absolutely. But can I impose my culinary opinions on everyone using universal logical justification? Not really. I'd need a recipe book from heaven for that. Similarly, Old Chalice's comment confuses having moral beliefs with justifying them as binding on everyone. It's the difference between I find murder horrifying and murder is objectively wrong in all possible worlds. The first is a statement of preference, empathy, or social cohesion. The second is a metaphysical claim. When Joey questions the justification of the second, and you respond with the first, you're playing soccer at a basketball game. The ball is round, but the rules are different. Also, there's a hidden fallacy here called non sequitur. The conclusion doesn't follow from the premises. I am non-religious, yet I find these acts wrong. Therefore, there is such a thing as moral wrong without religious backing doesn't logically follow unless you assume your sense of wrongness is evidence of objective morality. That assumption is what Joey is questioning. Act 5, Black Bishop 31788, the Bible Bash and the Red Herring. Bring in Black Bishop 31788, stage left, carrying a torch and a pitchfork, metaphorically, of course. They declare, "The Bible is the most commonly publicized book about an abusive father that sent his child to die. It promotes racism, slavery, rape, incest, abuse, hatred, division, and murder." Now, before we go further, as someone who studied theology, I'm not blind to problematic passages in religious texts. We can debate the historical context of ancient laws and whether they're binding now. But that's not what Joey's post was about. It wasn't about defending the Bible. It wasn't about Christianity. It was about the philosophical grounding of moral universality in a naturalistic worldview. So what is Black Bishop doing? They're launching a red herring into the conversation. Let's talk about how terrible the Bible is. That's fine if this were a Bible study debate club, but it misses the epistemological point. It's like if you ask, how do we know the external world exists? And someone replies, well, The Matrix had some plot holes, and by the way, Keanu Reeves can't act. You can critique the Bible all you want. There's a time and place. But using it to deflect from a meta-ethical discussion is misdirection. It's also an ad hominem fallacy by proxy. Religion is bad, therefore arguments about needing religion are bad. But you still haven't touched Joey's argument about deriving universal morality from purely natural facts. And what about the subtext? They imply, religion is violent, therefore not useful for morality. But that doesn't prove naturalism has a better foundation. It's like saying, my neighbor's cake burned, therefore I don't need a recipe to bake mine. You still need to find the right ingredients somewhere. Act 6, Sidofex Thepsitopian and the Dictionary Flex. Welcome to Semanticsville. We cannot forget Sidofex Thepsitopian, 10 points for that username. They responded to Joey's second post. Hot take, without religious beliefs, you cannot believe in heresy. This was Joey pointing out that the concept of heresy, historically, depends on a sacred orthodoxy. Without a sacred standard, calling something heresy becomes a metaphor, not literal. Sid screenshot the dictionary definition of heresy and triumphantly declared, "I'm pretty sure your statement is incorrect." They highlight that heresy can mean holding an opinion against the official or popular opinion, like playing Lady Gaga on a classical music station. They assume that because dictionaries have broadened the term, Joey is wrong. Friends, this is an appeal to dictionary and equivocation fallacy rolled into one. Appeal to dictionary is when you think citing a dictionary definition ends all argument. Fun fact, if you look up argument, one definition is a reason or set of reasons given. Another is an angry disagreement. So, by dictionary logic, all arguments must be angry. Joey's point wasn't about definitions. It was about the underlying logic of calling something heresy. Historically, heresy involves a transgression against a sacred or religious orthodoxy. If you call someone a heretic because they like pineapple pizza or vote differently, you're borrowing a religious concept to stigmatize dissent. That's exactly what Joey said. You can't meaningfully believe in heresy without some religious or quasi-religious standard. It has to be sacred, not just unpopular. Sid's dictionary screenshot of synonyms doesn't touch that. It's like if I say, you can't have murder without killing, and someone shows me a dictionary where murder is defined as really excellent. Yes, murder was once slang for great performance. Words shift. The philosophical point stands. Sid also missed Joey's follow-up comment clarifying, what is in question is not claiming to have party line beliefs, but rather the epistemological justification for holding all people to a moral belief, or party line, universally without exception. That's what the debate is about. But Sid focuses on the semantics of heresy, ignoring the deeper meta-ethical problem. That's like complaining about the font of a book while missing the plot twist. Act 7, Infidel 3476 and the Laughing Squad, when irony eats itself. Now we come to the main event, the ringmaster, the one who turned a comment into a separate thread with 1,434 views. Welcome Infidel 3476. You may recognize him from his catchphrase, translate to secular. Here's what he did. He reposted Joey's comment, added his own translation. If I didn't believe in my religion, I'd be a psychopath. I wouldn't know how to behave. And then he invited his followers to laugh. He told Joey in the only comment Joey hadn't shut off, "The smart kids are laughing at you." Then he asked, "Faith?" Ah, infidele. You turned a philosophical question into a straw man. You turned, without a transcendent standard, we can't justify universal moral claims, into, if I didn't have religion, I'd murder people. That's like turning, without a compass, you can't be sure which direction is objectively north, into, if I lose my compass, I'll run naked through traffic. Your translation is not only incorrect, it's malicious. And then you gather a crowd to laugh. That's intimidation disguised as wit. Let's break down the tactics at play. Straw man. You misrepresented Joey's argument as something else, so it's easier to attack. Joey questions epistemology. You translate it into religion equals not being a psychopath. It's like replacing my cake recipe with instructions for lasagna, then saying my cake is gross because it tastes like pasta. Ad hominem appeal to ridicule. Instead of debating, you go to your audience and say, "This person is insane. The smart kids are laughing." That's not an argument, it's high school cafeteria bullying. The number of clapping emojis doesn't increase the validity of your logic. Unless we're doing philosophy by applause, which, by the way, Socrates never advocated. Bandwagon fallacy. Everyone in this thread agrees you're wrong, so you must be wrong. That's right up there with, everyone thought the sun revolved around the earth, so Copernicus should have shut up. Consensus isn't always truth, folks. Ask Galileo. Or ask your friend who insisted the 2012 Mayan apocalypse would happen. Infidel says he doesn't like talking about people behind their back, but he reposted Joey's comment and invited a pile-on. That's like saying, "I don't want to gossip," while writing, "OMG, you won't believe what she wore," in glittery Sharpie on the wall. He even suggests Joey might have psychopathy or sociopathy. Casual diagnosis of mental illness? Check. That's stigma and poisoning the well. It's not only logically fallacious, it's ethically questionable. So Infidel, thank you for your demonstration of what Joey was warning about. You labeled his view as insane, you insisted your crowd laugh, and you refused to engage his argument. You used quasi-religious condemnation, heresy, against a philosophical position. You confirmed that humans, when passionate about a moral stance, can become dogmatic and punitive. You became the living proof of the claim that, without realizing it, people treat their ideological stances as sacred and resort to excommunication when challenged. Congratulations. The Peanut Gallery under Infidel's post. Let's not forget the supporting actors in this side thread. Someone a therapist, LOL. They hear, "It's impossible for me to use my own brain to decide right and wrong." That's not what Joey said. They've internalized the straw man. This is a perfect example of confirmation bias. They heard what they expected from a religious stereotype, not what was said. Also, the username suggests they're a therapist, but they're not using therapy skills to reflect and clarify. Unholy 6_6_6_ Enchantress. How do these people not see how absolutely insane they sound? That question is rhetorical, like asking, how do these people not see they have spinach in their teeth? The problem is, you've put spinach in their teeth yourself by misrepresenting their argument. You're mocking a caricature you drew. Michael Mielheim posts a meme. Take comfort in the fact that when an atheist is kind to you, it's not because they're trying to get into heaven. It's funny, I do enjoy memes, but again, it addresses a point that Joey never made. Joey didn't say atheists can't be kind, but this meme pretends he did. Avendal recounts being asked, "What's keeping you in line as an atheist? How do you know you're a good person?" and feeling angry. That's understandable if someone implied you'd become a raging psychopath, but Joey did not ask that. He asked about the epistemic justification for moral universality. Avendal's retort is to say, is everyone a psychopath outside of religion? As if there are no objective right and wrong outside Christianity? That rhetorical question misfires because Joey's question is exactly about whether there can be objective right and wrong outside a religious framework. Instead of answering, they assume the answer and attack him for raising it. That's begging the question, assuming what you're trying to prove. Philes Viridis gives an example about honor killings, how some cultures see them differently. They argue that what we consider crimes depends on culture and religion, and that this causes clashes. They inadvertently support the claim that moral norms vary and thus require justification beyond, "I don't like it." They actually highlight moral relativism, which is part of Joey's point, but they think they're refuting him by showing that morality can differ. It's like proving the existence of languages to claim communication doesn't need grammar. Dave Jakowenko says, "Morality is self-evident if you want to live in a civilized society. I know murder, rape, theft, oppression, slander, etc. is wrong because I wouldn't want it done to myself." This is essentially the golden rule. It's a decent moral heuristic, but it doesn't solve the meta-ethical question. It's still a preference. I wouldn't like being harmed, therefore I won't harm. But the jump from "I dislike being harmed" to "harm is objectively wrong for all humans" still requires a normative premise. He thinks he's solved the is-ought problem by appealing to self-interest plus empathy. He hasn't. He's just restated his preferences and projected them onto a universal. That's the naturalistic fallacy. ARCA 469123 adds something about if there's a God in your head that allows everything you want, then everything goes. Another straw man. Joey never said God allows everything. They're projecting a caricature of religion onto the conversation. Dagots wonders if Joey's viewpoint is an actual psychological illness. Psychopathy or sociopathy? That's another attempt to pathologize disagreement. It's an ad hominem disguised as concern. Instead of addressing the argument, it says, "Is this person sick?" That's like encountering someone who likes pineapple on pizza and wondering if they have a brain tumor. Hint, they don't. They just have questionable taste. Copier Nick suggests taking all the good parts of religion and discarding the God. Be like that. Remove the God. Live. That's essentially secular humanism. But how do we know which parts are good, and why are they good? Again, normative assumptions. Riverwater 18 interprets Joey's position as, "I have no empathy and would happily murder." Another straw man. It's like whispering into the wind, "I love cats," and someone in the next room says, "Why do you hate dogs?" Michael Eanon interprets Joey as saying, "As long as I have God's permission, nothing is impermissible." Another misreading. Joey didn't talk about divine commands. He talked about justification of universal moral claims. People keep projecting a divine command theory onto him because they're used to arguing with that. It's like reflex. CJHarper.NZ says, "If religion was the only right way to obtain morals, well, I am the most immoral person. F religion." Then adds that Christians who believe this crap aren't Christians, but lack faith. This comment expresses resentment. Maybe they've been hurt by religious moralism. That's understandable. But again, they misinterpreted the argument. It's a straw man combined with ad hominem against religion and false dichotomy, religion versus no morals. Joey never said religion is the only way to be moral. Haynes as Pi wonders if Joey meant to write sin instead of morality. They think sin and morality are two completely different things. They hope that's what he meant. It's another misinterpretation. Joey used moral wrong, which can overlap with sin in religious contexts, but he clarified he was talking about philosophical justifications. Yet someone thinks maybe he meant sin, and thus they dismiss the argument as irrelevant. That's a red herring and straw man, again. Ojala.Mark and Straightforward 538 talk about not being able to get dressed without the Bible, implying that religious people can't think for themselves. This is an ad hominem, insulting an entire group. It also doesn't touch Joey's point. It's like responding to a question about astrophysics with, "Nerds have no friends." Not helpful. Expatilation_inco says, Everything is transactional with these people, implying religious morality is about self-interest. That's a critique of certain religious ethics, not of meta-ethics, and doesn't address the is-ought problem. Carbonized Stardust posts a mini rant about Christians ignoring their own book and being antichrists. Great, therapy session noted. But again, irrelevant to Joey's argument. Do you see a pattern? People are venting personal grievances, diagnosing, mocking, or philosophizing about something else entirely. Very few engage the core question: how do we justify universal moral wrongs in a strictly naturalistic framework? Instead, they fight straw men, throw memes, and call for applause. It's like you ask, what's the integral of x squared? And 20 people shout, math is stupid anyway, and by the way, my teacher didn't let me go to the bathroom. Act 8, Logical Fallacies 101, Pop Quiz with Isabella. At this point, I feel like a teacher standing before a class of rowdy kids, holding a chalkboard that reads, Logical Fallacies 101. So let's turn this into a learning moment. For each of these comments, let's name the fallacy or fallacies at work. Straw man, misrepresenting your opponent's argument to make it easier to attack. Example, turning Joey's meta-ethical question into, you think atheists are psychopaths. Ad hominem, attacking the person instead of the argument. Example, suggesting Joey has a mental illness, or implying religious people can't think independently. Red herring, introducing irrelevant topics to distract from the argument. Example, talking about the Bible's morality instead of the is-ought gap. Appeal to authority, citing an authority to settle an argument when the authority isn't relevant. Example, saying, Socrates already said so, as if his word ends discussion. Appeal to popularity, bandwagon, suggesting an argument is true because many people agree. Example, the smart kids are laughing at you. Begging the question, assuming what you're trying to prove. Example, saying atheists can be moral and therefore morality doesn't require justification. You assume the existence of moral facts. Non sequitur, the conclusion doesn't logically follow the premises. Example, I find murder wrong, therefore moral wrongs exist independently of religion. False dichotomy, presenting two options as the only possibilities. Example, either morality comes from God or anything goes. Slippery slope, arguing that if we accept one thing, it leads inevitably to extreme consequences. Example, suggesting that without religion, we become psychopaths, when the actual question is about justification. Appeal to emotion, using fear, pity, or ridicule instead of reason. Example, laughing at Joey or lamenting past experiences to shut down discussion. Now, I don't expect the comment section to become a logic classroom, but if you're going to engage in philosophical debate, at least avoid the rhetorical equivalent of stepping on a rake. Act 9, the reasonable response, how to actually engage. Let's imagine a parallel universe where the comment section understood context, read carefully, and answered in good faith. It might look like this. User 1. Interesting point. Are you arguing for moral realism being dependent on something like a Platonic form or divine command? User 2. I'm an atheist moral realist. I think moral truths can be objective without gods, but I acknowledge that's a metaphysical assumption. Here's why. User 3. I lean toward moral relativism. I agree we lack a universal grounding, and thus we should be cautious about imposing our values. But I think we can still justify harm reduction through pragmatic social contracts. User 4. Could it be that moral wrongness stems from intrinsic human dignity? Even in a naturalistic framework, we might posit that conscious experience has value. User 5. What about constructivism? That moral truths are constructed by rational agents under ideal conditions, Rawlsian view. How would your argument address that? See, that's a conversation. People state positions, acknowledge assumptions, and discuss. No one calls anyone a psychopath. No one appeals to memes. And if someone jokes, it's at the level of, utilitarianism is fine until you're the one being thrown off a bridge to stop a trolley. But we don't live in that universe. We live in one where infidel side thread gets dozens of clapping hands for misrepresenting someone. That's why we need Isabella with a mic. Act 10. Defending Joey, the heart of the matter. Let me now speak as Joey's champion. Joey, you dear troublemaker, you asked a hard question. You didn't assert that atheists can't be moral. You didn't declare that religion is the only foundation. You asked, if we assume strict atheism and no transcendent standard, can we coherently assert universal moral wrongs? Your argument flows like this. Premise. Under strict naturalism, everything is physical. All facts are descriptive, about what is, not about what ought to be. Evolution, psychology, sociology, they describe why we have certain behaviors or feelings. Observation. Many modern moral claims are universal. Murder is wrong everywhere. And normative. One ought not murder. Problem. You cannot derive normative claims from descriptive facts without at least one normative premise. Hume's is-ought gap. If all you have are natural facts, where do you get the normative premise? Conclusion. Without importing something beyond mere facts, whether that be a divine command, a Platonic moral truth, a constructivist rational will, or something, you cannot justify moral wrongs as universal obligations. You can have preferences, feelings, social contracts, but not binding universal shoulds. Therefore, if someone rejects all transcendent or normative metaphysics, imposing a universal moral code becomes logically unjustified. That's the argument. It invites discussion. Are there naturalistic ways to get normative premises? Do we need realism, constructivism, or rationalism? It's a conversation among ethicists like Mackey, Korsgaard, Parfit, and Street. It's not a judgment of character. It's a question of grounding. But the comment section turned it into, Joey hates atheists, Joey is crazy, Joey is dangerous, and they used intimidation to shut down the conversation. They performed exactly what Joey was worried about. When people treat moral opinions as sacred and unassailable, they ostracize and shame those who question them. They replicate religious patterns of heresy and excommunication, albeit in a secular guise. So Joey, rest easy, your argument stands. It may be contested by moral realists or constructivists, but the comment brigade didn't engage with those. They engaged with a straw man and inadvertently proved your point. Humans, religious or not, often act with religious fervor when defending their moral beliefs. A word on intimidation tactics. Let's examine how intimidation showed up. Misrepresentation and mockery. By translating your argument into a caricature about psychopathy, infidel ensures his followers laugh. Mockery is used to maintain group cohesion and discourage dissent. Gatekeeping, the smart kids. Suggesting that intellectual or moral worth is tied to agreeing with the crowd. It's a way to shame and belittle the outlier. Pathologizing. Labeling disagreement as mental illness, psychopathy/sociopathy, delegitimizes the argument by delegitimizing the person. Excommunication. Declaring someone an antichrist or cultish, implying they are outside the moral community. Appeal to majority. The idea that because a bunch of commenters agree, the argument is settled. It pressures the original speaker to conform or be ostracized. These tactics mirror religious excommunication. They treat ideological beliefs like atheistic moral realism or secular humanism as sacred. They produce heretics. Joey became an online heretic for raising a meta-ethical question. So when Joey said, "You can't believe in heresy without religion," guess what? The commentariat created a heresy trial right there. Irony's favorite meal is served. Act 11. Your friendly roast of each commenter. Love and logic. Now, because this is a comedy show, we need to sprinkle some playful roast. But we roast with love, like a good cup of coffee. Hot, a little bitter, but ultimately uplifting. Random username 2961. Honey, thank you for shouting Socrates. Next time, maybe try reading Nicomachean Ethics. It's not by Socrates, but it's got some killer footnotes. Stephen Ogden, 58. Keep asking questions. I like your curiosity. Also, read more about the Euthyphro dilemma. You're onto something. But don't assume Joey answered it with a misstep. He simply pointed you to office hours. Old Chalice 8, your empathy is touching. You'd be an excellent friend. I'd trust you with my plants. But next time, distinguish between personal conviction and meta-ethical justification. And try pineapple pizza. You may still hate it, but you'll have grounds to argue. Black Bishop 31788. If you want to critique the Bible, let's do it. But maybe start a new thread? We're on channel Is Ought Gap, not Book Club Exposing Leviticus. Pseudofexthepsytopian. Dictionaries are wonderful. They help me cheat at Scrabble. But they're not philosophy. They record usage. They don't settle metaphysics. If you're going to screenshot something, at least screenshot a Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy entry on moral realism. It won't fit on your phone screen, but your heart will expand. Infidel 3476. You've built a brand on mocking misreadings. I respect the hustle, but misrepresentation and bullying are not the hallmarks of a free thinker. If you want to debate, do so charitably. Also, as someone who translated "you need justification" into "I'd be a psychopath," I worry you'd translate "the sky is blue" into "my cat is a communist." Invest in nuance. It's buy one, get one free right now. Snuggle Drug, thanks for the popcorn emoji. I know it means you're enjoying the drama, but also remember, real people are behind those comments. When you talk about their brain capabilities, you reveal more about your empathy than their logic. Unholy 6_6_6 Enchantress. If you think someone sounds insane, ask questions instead of laughing. Maybe you'll find they're quoting Hume, not hearing voices. Or maybe they are hearing voices and need support, not condemnation. Someone a therapist, LOL. Therapy involves listening and reflecting. Try summarizing before diagnosing. Instead of, "It's impossible to use your brain," ask, "Are you suggesting objective morality requires transcendent grounding?" See the difference? Avendal. I know being asked, "What keeps you in line?" can feel insulting. But don't assume Joey asked that. He didn't. Also, when you say, "Is everyone a psychopath outside religion?" you commit the same straw man you resent. Compassion goes both ways. Feles Viridis. Your cultural anthropology is on point. Morality varies across cultures. That's exactly why we need philosophical justification. You might be arguing for moral relativism. That's a respectable position. But by saying morality depends on culture, you're not refuting Joey. You're providing data for his premise. Dave Jakowenko. You believe morality is self-evident because you wouldn't want harm done to you. That's nice, but it's still a preference. Self-evident to you may not be self-evident to everyone. Ask a utilitarian who wants to maximize total happiness. They might harm one to save 5 and call it moral. So we need justification. Arca 469123. Your story about God's permitting everything is interesting, but Joey wasn't advocating divine permission. He was questioning naturalistic justification. Different conversation. Carbonized stardust. Calling people antichrists because they disagree with you is exactly the religious language you claim to reject. Irony's a boomerang. Haynes's pie. You hope he meant sin. That would have been easier for you to dismiss, but he meant what he wrote. He meant moral wrong. They're related but distinct concepts. Honor his words. Don't replace them with ones you prefer. Ohala.mark and straightforward 538. Your jokes about not being able to dress without the Bible are cute, but they reinforce stereotypes instead of offering insight. If you want to critique religious moralism, do so substantively. Otherwise, there's a queue at the Comedy Club open mic. cjharper.nz. Venting about religion can be cathartic, but conflating Joey's philosophical question with religious moralism is misdirected anger. If you want to critique fundamentalism, aim correctly. Joey's not your target. Copiernick. Taking the good parts of religion and leaving the rest is a nice sentiment. But again, how do we know which parts are good? That's the normative question Joey's raising. You're assuming the answer. Riverwater, 18, and others who said, I'd happily murder without religion. Ask yourself, why do you assume that's the implication? Maybe because society often frames morality as dependent on God. Joey challenged that. Instead of projecting, engage. DeGott's, diagnosing psychopathy? Bold of you. I hope you don't do that professionally. People who raise philosophical questions aren't mentally ill by default. Save the DSM for actual diagnosis. To all the clapping emojis, the side comments, and the peanut gallery, I see you. I hear you. You're passionate, but passion without comprehension becomes noise. We can do better. Act 12, the meta lesson, what this teaches us about discourse. You might think this has been a long roast, and yes, we're only halfway through. Check your watch, there are still 30 minutes to go. But there's a larger lesson. This comment section is a microcosm of modern discourse. We often read superficially, scanning for keywords that trigger our identity threats. Respond to what we assume the person means, not what they said. Use insults, memes, and diagnostic labels to shut down nuance. Equate disagreement with moral failure. Appeal to authority or popularity to feel safe. Fear complexity because it threatens our mental efficiency. But philosophy teaches patience. It teaches us to read charitably, to ask clarifying questions, to separate the person from the argument, and to accept that some questions are hard. Philosophy invites humility. I may be wrong. It invites curiosity. Tell me more. It invites courage. I'll hold an unpopular view if it seems true. In that spirit, I commend Joey. He dared ask a question. He dared challenge the assumption that moral universality is easily justified in a strictly atheist framework. He didn't say, religion is necessary to be moral. He said, strict naturalism faces a serious hurdle in grounding universal morality. That's a legitimate point shared by philosophers like Mackey, who called objective moral values queer in a naturalistic world, and by some atheists who accept moral error theory. It's also challenged by others who argue for moral realism without God, like Derek Parfit. The debate is rich. It doesn't need mocking. Act 13. How Isabella would respond. If I had been there in the moment, watching the thread swirl out of control, here's what I would have done. I would have commented, friends, Joey's point is about meta-ethics, not about atheists lacking empathy. He's questioning whether, in a naturalistic worldview, we can justify universal moral claims. That's a classic philosophical debate. If you disagree, maybe share your theory of how moral facts exist independently of divine commands or human opinion. But let's not misinterpret him as claiming non-religious people are immoral. That's not what he said. Also, please refrain from diagnosing strangers with psychopathy in the comments. That's not good practice. Then I'd have added a funny gif of a cat reading Kant's Critique of Pure Reason, because sometimes humor can disarm tension. And maybe, just maybe, someone would have said, oh, I misread him. Let's discuss moral realism. But that's a dream. In reality, I'd probably get labeled the thought police or accused of gatekeeping. So instead, I turned the whole thing into a 1-hour comedy special, because that's my coping mechanism. And because if you can't laugh at the absurdity of humans on the internet, you'll cry. Act 14. Isabella's Guide to Surviving Philosophy Threads. Before we wrap up, here's my 6-point guide to survive philosophical discussions online. Read twice, comment once. Reread the original post to ensure you understand it before responding. If the post uses a term like epistemological, look it up in a philosophy source, not just dictionary.com. Ask clarifying questions. Instead of assuming, ask, do you mean X or Y? For Joey's post, someone could ask, are you suggesting moral realism requires religion? Address the argument, not the person. Resist ad hominem. Saying, your argument is flawed because of premise P is better than, you're insane. Avoid straw manning. Respond to the strongest version of the argument. You can even state it yourself. If I understand correctly, you're arguing that. Acknowledge emotions. It's okay to say, this topic triggers me because I've been judged for my beliefs. Own your emotions. Don't project them onto your opponent's argument. Humility. Remember, you might be wrong. Philosophy is full of smart people disagreeing. If Kant, Mill, and Nietzsche couldn't settle it, maybe your comment can contain doubt. Follow these, and we might turn comment wars into cafes of conversation, or at least reduce the number of times someone is called a psychopath. Baby steps. Act 15. A love letter to Joey and to everyone else, even the trolls. Joey, thank you for being brave. Many people keep silent because they fear exactly what happened. Mockery, misinterpretation, and piles of angry replies. But you stepped into the arena. That's Socratic. That's admirable. I hope you don't retreat. I hope you keep asking questions, and I hope next time more people will be ready to engage in good faith. To the commenters, thank you too. Even if you misread, even if you mocked, you showed up because you care about morals and meaning. That passion is valuable. If we can channel it into listening and reasoning, we'll all be better for it. To Infidel and Company, may your future translations be accurate. If you insist on making memes, make them about real points. Use your platform to encourage nuance, not ridicule. And maybe, just maybe, read the SEP on moral anti-realism. It's long, but the clapping hands you'll get from philosophers will be worth it. And to everyone who's ever been dogpiled for raising a hard question, I see you. I've been you. Stay curious. The world needs people who ask why, even when others shout, "Why ask?" or call you names. As Nietzsche said, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how, and he who has a why to think can bear almost any comment. Act 16. Closing. Laugh, learn, repeat. We've been together for nearly an hour. My throat is dry, my water glass is empty, and you might be thinking, wow, I didn't know you could talk about a comment section this long. Welcome to the world of philosophy and stand-up. Remember, the internet can be an echo chamber or a playground of ideas, depending on how we treat each other. Let's choose curiosity over condemnation, humor over hatred, logic over laziness, and empathy over enmity. And when you see a thread exploding, ask yourself, have they read Hume? Because if the answer is no, you might just be witnessing the is-ought gap in real time. And when someone says, hot take, without religious beliefs, you cannot believe in heresy, maybe don't screenshot a dictionary. Maybe ask them what they mean by heretic. And if someone says, there is no such thing as a moral wrong without religious backing, maybe read about the meta-ethical debate between moral realists and error theorists. It will make you sound smart at parties. Finally, if you ever feel the urge to call someone insane because of a philosophical statement, remember what the great philosophers would say. That says more about you than them. Or, as I like to say, philosophy, it's like wrestling with angels, only the angels are logical premises. Thank you and good night. Tip your servers, read some Kant, and don't forget to laugh at yourself before you laugh at others. Peace.